Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Alrighty. I believe we are live. It's Tuesday. It's June 1st. It's a new month. What a wonderful, wonderful day. Good evening to all of you out there. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what's in your glass. And greetings to everybody. Let's see. Just trying to figure out a few more things here. And there we go. So we are live. It is Tasting Tuesday. It's a little thing that we do once a week. And it's a celebration of people, of wine, and more specifically, mostly about Virginia wine. So let's say hi to a few people. Let us know where you're calling in from. And this evening, first guest is James Belitho. Good evening from Williamsburg. Hope you're doing well. We've got Jenna Morrison, Happy Tasting Tuesday, and Erica Johansson is calling from Shenandoah Valley. Beautiful, beautiful. Linda Irvin right around the corner from us in the beautiful, beautiful town of Seaville. We have Stephanie 10. Hello and Happy Tasting Tuesday from Steph and Tom all the way in Mount Vernon. Good evening to you folks too. We have Tracy France. They've got the 17 Heritage Open. We got Maureen Hamilton Scott drinking a 15 Heritage. So Maureen, once you've done that, I haven't had that for a while. Would love to know how that's tasting. Virginia Wine Time, the great folks of Paul and Warren calling from Washington, D.C., the great capital. And Eric from Roanoke, Virginia. Back again, Mr. Stiff. Eric, hope you're doing well, sir. Good evening to you. So, what a wonderful, wonderful week. Happy Memorial Day. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I hope you had a safe weekend. We've got Earl Greaser from Ohio, and that's Earl and Janet. Good evening to you. Tonight, I'm excited because we are talking about our 2017 Heritage. We're going to talk about the blend. It is a blended wine. Obviously, most of what we do is single varietal wines. We're going to talk about the blend. We're going to talk about the name. And as always, we're going to answer the questions as they came up. So let's see who else is there. We've got the Bassett's, Anna and Brian in Reston. We got Dave Maddox, and he says he's got the Heritage in the bag. And there's the Sugamellis wondering where they were. With the Sleigh Bars and at the Mathises. Good evening to all of you. God bless. Hope you guys are doing well. Aaron and Kathy are calling from Chester, Virginia. We've got Donna Goff, Donna and Ed, and they are in Reston. Always lovely. And we've got Steve and Roni all the way from Portsmouth, Ohio. So we've got quite a few states kind of represented. And then Susan Glenn says, hi, Trish. So who's that? That's I'm not sure. It might be Trish and Jeff. Glenn Johnson decanted for 4 hours A/B testing the 17 Heritage versus a Paso Robles Cabernet Sauvignon. That's a big test, Mr. Johnson. Paso Robles in California represented. So let us know. And then you got Kimberly and Mike, and they're also calling from Reston. Good evening to everybody. Anyway, so as always, if you're new to this, and most that I'm seeing are not, but if you are, it's a live segment. It's just about celebrating Virginia wine. Obviously, we were focusing a little bit on Keswick the last 4 weeks. We're finishing up the bundle. As always, this is also educational. We want you to learn something new, have fun with wine, sort of deconstruct wine as it is. And if there are any comments, thoughts, positive or negative, please let us know. If you're tasting along, we are tasting the 2017 Heritage. But if you don't have the Heritage, grab another Keswick wine. It could be a Bordeaux blend, a Heritage from a previous vintage, like Maureen has. Could be the Cabs, the Merlots, the PVs. The choice is yours. And if you don't have Keswick, it doesn't have to be Keswick. Let's try and keep it Virginian, and let's have some fun with it. So ours has been decanting. I've been decanting it for going on 3 hours now. It is a young wine, even though the vintage 2017, it was a wine that we bottled December 4th. So we really are talking about 6 months in the bottle, give or take, for a wine that spent 34 months in the barrel. So it is young. And there's Kathy Clifton. Good evening to you, Kathy. So lovely to connect with you on Facebook the other day. I hope you're doing well. And as always, my lovely wife is next to me. And we want to answer the questions. And those that we can get to online, we certainly will. And those that we don't, we will answer at the back. Holly and Chris calling from Richmond, I assume, unless you're traveling. But good evening to Holly and Chris. But more importantly, the way we start things off is by just saying, God bless you all. Hope you're doing well. I hope your families are well. We're almost at summer. June 21st, to give or take, is summer. Time for optimism, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful kind of time of the year in the great state of Virginia. So, as always, I have my bag, and those that don't know, bag is the big ass glass, because red wines that are big and bold require some oxygenation. So instead of a fluted glass like for champagne, or a more tulip-shaped glass for white wines, I tend to like a glass that really sort of aerates and gives it some exposure to oxygen. So good evening to all, and thank you for your time. We know time is precious, and we appreciate you spending it with us. So let's jump into it, if we may. This is the last of the bundle. As you know, we did the Merlot, the Block 7, the Cab Franc, the Block 7. Last week we did the Block 7 Cab Sav. Tonight we were talking about one of the few blended wines that we make, and that is the Heritage 2017, which again assumes that most of the wine comes from the vintage 17, meaning the year in which the grapes used to make the wine was picked. Obviously, all the fruit from this bottle is from 2017. It's all 100% estate grown. The blend, by the way, is 85% Cabernet Sauvignon with equal parts Merlot and Cab Franc, so 7.5% each. The first thing we want to get out of the way is the name, because a lot of people say, why does Keswick not make a Meritage? Is it because we don't want to belong to this? That's not it. The Heritage was a wine that we came out with in 2002. The initial blend back then included a portion of Touriga Nacional. Now, we've spoken and touched upon it that Touriga Nacional is now allowed in a Bordeaux blend. But back then, Touriga is it's most famous in Portugal as use of, obviously, as a dry wine, probably more famously in terms of a port blender. So ours was Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sav, and Touriga, and we came up with the name Heritage. It's also a wine that we don't do every single year. The only vintages that we've done Heritage are 2002, 4, 6, 7, and then we skipped many years. We only did one in 15, and this one is in 17. So this really is the sixth wine, because we did two Heritage style wines in 2017. We did a Cab based blend, and we did a Merlot based blend, or you can sort of think of it as a left bank style or a right bank style. All right, so let's start right at the beginning with the vintage. Heritage is something that we don't do every single year. I think part of that is, our Cabs and our Cab Francs and our PVs and our Merlots. Those are the wines that we really are very proud about. Also the part of making single varietal wines is sort of a nod and a learning about the vineyard. We've only been grape growers for 20 years. We're still trying to learn our terroir and where the best fruit comes from. We have multiple blocks of each of these wines. We have 2 blocks of Merlot. We have, 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks of Cab Sav, and then we have 6 blocks of Cabernet Franc. Now, part and parcel of what we're trying to do is, obviously, we're trying to make the best wine possible, but we're also trying to learn where those flavor components come from. Which blocks are the more acidic, which ones are the more aromatic, which ones are the more fruit forward. So we have sort of pursued the kind of the goal of making single varietal wines from, as you know, single geographical regions. So the Block 7, the Block 3, the Block 2, those are very specific clones on certain rootstocks, on certain soil types. The wines are made separately. We analyze the wines 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and hopefully we get some data that'll allow us to learn how to best utilize those grapes down the line. So Heritage is a wine that we make generally when we have not only a voluminous year, but we also have a year that is quite quality driven as well. And 2017 was exactly that. We had enough volume to make Cab, single varietal, and Franc and Merlot, but we had a lot of wines, and we felt that we could make a blended wine that really sort of was a nod to the strength of the vintage, and then allowed us to explore what blending does, because it is a tool in the winemaker's arsenal that allows you to kind of manipulate wines, if you will, right? So why blend? Because this wine theoretically is actually a Cabernet Sauvignon. If we were to label this as a 2017 Cabernet, we would be totally in our right, because it's 85% of the varietal. So we could blend various portions of other grapes in there, and we could do that. But we made a Block 7, we made a Block 3, blending can be done for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a consistent house style. If you think of blending wines, I always think of something like champagne. Champagne is a blend of multiple vineyards, and it really sort of gives you a consistent house style. The other thing blending does is it blends for complexity. You know, sometimes, and especially in Virginia, when you have sort of good years and bad years and in between, you know, varietal is going to showcase different sort of characteristics. So in dry years, you know, Cabernet might show a little bit more alcohol, a little bit more tannin, lower acid, you know, darker fruit spectrum. But in greener years or wetter years, it's going to tend towards that more herbaceous herbal note. So blending can really add complexity by building up what the varietal doesn't have. So Merlot gives you plushness and softness and roundness and gives you this really elegant kind of structural feel. Cabernet Franc can give you some spice, and it can give you some really sort of mid to back palate kind of texture there as well. And then the other thing you can do is, you know, so you've got complexity, you've got the house style blend, and then, you know, I'm drawing a blank on the third reason whatsoever. So blending is a tool that can help you manipulate and create a wine that is balanced, right? Obviously, that's the other thing, excuse me. So a wine that maybe is a bit more acidity, you want something maybe a bit more fruit forward, so you can blend for balance, because at the end of the day, that is exactly what wine is. Wine is an amalgamation, so to speak, of so many components, alcohols and fruits and acids and tannins. The balance really sort of just suggests that all those components in the wine are harmonious, that they play together nicely in the sandpit, right? So the acid is not being dominant and makes the wine too tart. The tannin is not being too dominant, makes the wine too dry and rich and drying, you know, so balance and complexity, and then sort of a house style. So again, the heritage for us, we pull it out of the arsenal every now and again. Now in 2019, which was a wonderful year in terms of quality, we did not make a heritage wine. We pursued, again, the varietal kind of blend as well. So this is a blend. The heritage, obviously, is because of the Touriga Nacional. Now, how the wine was made, 17 was a beautiful vintage. It wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold, it was long. You know, we had sort of cooler evenings, which really retains acidity. It slows down ripening. It retains acidity and the aroma compounds as well. But then during the day, we had really hot, warm, drying days. So you were building up sugars and you were building up sort of tannin structure as well. And then when we harvested the fruit, we really had this beautiful balance of brightness and elegance, but you had tannins that were not chalky and astringent and dry. They were soft and silky and supple. And you had good ripeness. You know, again, if you think of ripeness in terms of fruit, everyone knows what a ripe banana is, an overripe banana and an underripe banana. So we're dealing in ripeness, not in underripe, so the seeds are too green and the acid's too much and the tannins are not developed. But we certainly don't want overripeness where the sugars are too high and then you have alcohol levels that are a little bit exorbitant, because that makes the wort hot and warm, and then you get jammy flavors and stewed kind of characters. So I think in my mind, we were able to harvest physiologically ripe fruit, but balanced fruit, acidity and sugar and alcohol potential and acid in there as well. So the first question I saw is, how do you come on the blend? The honest answer is, at this point in the harvest, we're looking at the Merlot, we're looking at the Cabernet Franc, and we're looking at the Cabernet Sauvignon. We're looking at them as single varietal wines. We're trying to make the best Cabernet, the best Merlot, and the best Cab Franc. So each portion of this blend is actually made as a single entity. So we're trying at that point to make the best possible Cab Franc that we can, the best Merlot and the best Cab Sav, right? So we're not thinking of how's it going to be incorporated into a blend. So the Cabernet has to be tannic, the Cab Franc has to be spicy, and the Merlot has to be fruity, because we're going to blend them. At that point, we're just trying to make the best possible single varietal that we can. So each of these wines, as reds are always, they're fermented on their skins. The fermentations, you know, to keep it general, would be they're not hot, over-extracted, overworked fermentations. You know, we're not pumping over every 2 hours for 10 straight days. You know, we're not using a lot of enzymes. We're not bleeding the hell out of the wine. You know, we're trying to get extraction, but we're not trying to get over-extraction. We're trying to get dark flavors. You know, we're trying to get tannins. We're trying to get the anthocyanin content, the color pigments, but we're not trying to over-extract the wine as well. Again, our philosophy, just to reiterate, is that what you taste in the glass really is a product of the vineyard, which is the only real thing that makes us unique, right? It's our soil, it's our elevation, it's our row orientation, it's the clone, it's the rootstock. Obviously, it's the management thereof as well. It's also an expression of the environment, the sunshine, the heat, the nutrients, the water, the wind, all of that. And as such, the winemaker's job is really the conservation of the flavors that rock up at the crush pad, right? We're not trying to generate flavors aren't there. We're really trying to take an instrument and plug it into an amplifier and kind of share it, if you want an analogy, right? So the fruit was ripe, there was no rot, it was clean, so all we had to do was handle it gently. So destemmed fruit, sorted out, fermentations that we made sure that they finished. And what I mean by that is when the sugar's conversion into alcohol, which is the fermentation, we want to make sure that all the sugar ferments out to the alcohol. So we were feeding the ferments appropriately, but not excessively. We want to make sure that all that sugar was dry, so we weren't dealing with a stuck fermentation with residual sugar, which could deal with VA issues like ethyl acetate, which is nail polish remover, and vinegar. And then, we didn't do a lot of post-ferment maceration. We weren't trying to build up these massively tannic wines. And then the oak usage, there is not a single new barrel on this wine. The newest barrel that we have is a barrel that had been used twice. And that only represents about 25% of the wine. The majority of the barrels, the 75%, are actually 3 to 4 years old. There's a couple of reasons for that. We had such purity of fruit and we had such acidity, we didn't want to dress it up with oak, right? You can, and you can sell that, and you can say, the wine tastes like cedar and cigar box, and coffee and smoke and pepper, all these secondary flavors that come from barrels. But what we really wanted to do was express the purity of the Cabernet, because it was such a luscious, not luscious in terms of sweet, but luscious in terms of fruit flavor. It had dark spectrum berries, had the cassis and the black plum and the black cherry. And the Cabernet Franc didn't have that bell pepper kind of characteristic. It showed a lot of the white pepper and the black pepper that we rarely get. And then the Merlot had this really lovely core of red spectrum fruit, the cherries and the raspberries and the currants. And the tannins were so soft and supple that we didn't really need to use a lot of new oak to sort of build up flavors. It had this purity and it had this elegance about it. So we used French oak exclusively, some barriques and some 500-liter barrels, but mainly we were using barrels that were seasoned or used previously because we really wanted to conserve the primary fruit characteristics in the wine. It was also a determining factor in the fact that this wine spent 34 months in barrel. Now that's excessive in the world of wine. Bordeaux's, you're looking at 16 to 18 months. Obviously, if you're doing things like Brunello de Montalcino, you're looking only at around 2 years in barrel, 5 years in bottle. Even Nebbiolo, like Barolo, only has to spend 18 months in barrel, 3 years before it's released. So 34 months in oak is an exorbitant amount of time. Now, the fact that we were using sort of seasoned barrels meant that we were able to leave the wine in the barrel for that amount of time and not really make the wine taste like sawdust and cedar and, kind of dress it up as well. So, and then once we got to bottling, so we bottled it. But the other question was the blend. The blend was done 2 years after the maturation at 22 months. We had done our first racking, the wines were still singular, and then we made our wines and we looked at the components and we played around. We came up with two blends, two that I really, really liked. One was Merlot based, which we refer to as more the right bank style. And what I mean by that, obviously, if you know Bordeaux, you've got the Gironde and it breaks into the Garonne and the Dordogne. On the right, you've got the communes or the appellations of Saint-Emilion and Pomerol, and they are generally based on ferrous oxide clay. So ferrous clay, right? So clay which Merlot thrives in Cabernet Franc, but it's a little bit cooler, so Cabernet doesn't really do well on the right bank. Hence, the right bank style is generally Merlot with Cabernet Franc. Now on the left bank, in the Medoc and the Haut Medoc, you've got a lot of sort of gravel kind of soils. It's you've got the maritime climate, and you've got the Gulf Stream, which is really, really warm. So Cabernet can ripen there. And then you're looking at Saint-Estèphe and Pauillac and Saint-Julien and Margaux, and that's on the left bank of the Gironde River. So what we mean by left bank, Cabernet based, right bank, Merlot based. We bottled the Merlot-based wine after 2 years because Merlot Dominant was just so soft and elegant. It was a ballerina. It had this fluidity to it and this elegance to it, but it didn't have the brute and the power and the tannic structure that I think we're going to taste tonight. So we felt that it could go into the bottle a little bit earlier. It could age in the bottle probably in that 6 to 8 to 9 to 10 year range. But the Cabernet just really had a little bit more depth and a little bit more structure. Probably didn't have the floral and the perfume or the elegance that the Merlot did at that point. We felt that a little bit more time in the barrel would help. But also in saying that, I think if you're going to age a wine, all of our wines, the Cab Sav, but this is a wine that you can put aside for the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years. Again, I haven't tasted this wine, for a while, so I'm really, really excited about that as well. The blend as well, we try to keep it simplistic. We knew we wanted to make a style reminiscent of the left bank and the right bank. The portions, if you've gone to consensus, you know how a percent here and a percent there can really affect the wine. And we knew that we wanted to do a Cabernet dominant wine. And the Cabernet was so ripe and rich and so dark fruited, it just needed a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So we felt like equal quantities of Merlot and Cabernet Franc just balanced it out. The Merlot just to give it some plushness, and Cabernet Franc just to give it a little bit of that spicy edge on the back there as well. The wine is bottled unfined and unfiltered, which means that over time a sediment, which is natural, will occur. And that's because tannins and proteins will precipitate. They do bind together. They'll precipitate out of solution. So if you keep the wine on its side for an extended period of time, it's going to kind of deposit a sediment. So decanting a wine through the screen. So if you get the deposit, it's absolutely fine. It's not an indication that the wine is spoiled. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. The other thing you'll notice, it's bottled under a technical cork. It's not a natural cork. Again, the closure is really, really important because we want to make sure that when you drink the wine, the experience of drinking it is not tainted by a packaging product as well. And that's about it. 22 minutes to chat about the wine. And again, keep the questions coming. Let us know what you're having it with, what you think of the wine, and let's sort of jump into it a little bit. A couple of questions. People are asking about my WSET level 3. Thank you so much. I did write the exam this past Saturday. I do know that I passed the tasting portion, the blind tasting portion, which was great. I did think that I have a decent sort of drinking ability, so I got through the tasting portion. The essay and the multiple choice we'll find out in a bit. But thank you for all those that sort of sent well wishes and wanted to know how I did. But I wrote this past Saturday in Richmond. Fingers crossed. I felt that it went pretty well, and we'll find out in a couple of weeks. So thank you for all of those. All right, so let's jump into it and let's have a look at this wine and break it down. So the first thing, obviously, is the color, and again, the color is not going to show you quality, right? If you think of low color kind of grapes, you jump out and you think Pinot Noir. And you think Nebbiolo. If you think Nebbiolo from Barbaresco or Barolo, it is really high acid, high tannin, but it has low color. So a dark wine is not better than a lighter wine or an opaque wine. But there's a couple of things that color can tell you. Again, with reds, you hold it at an angle. You're not looking at the core of the wine, the deepest part of the wine. You're looking at the rim. But you are looking to see how far the core extends to the rim. And if you look at this wine, it almost extends to the rim. So this is a deeply pigmented wine, but the rim is more sort of reddish, right? So it's not purple and it's not brownish, so we call that garnet. So this is a deep ruby color. So it's got beautiful extraction. It is youthful because a wine with age, which tend to show a little bit of that sort of brownish and orangey kind of rims as well. The only other thing you would do is maybe swirl it. You would look at sort of the legs or the tiers of the wine. Look at the density, how thick, how slowly they come down. That could tell you that there's maybe some alcohol in the wine or there's some residual sugar in the wine. Now, this wine is bone dry. Dry meaning that there's no perceptible sugar. It does have 0.2% residual sugar, 2 grams per liter. Because as we've always said, the 5-carbon pentose, arabinose, xylose sugars, they do not ferment. You're fermenting mainly glucose, fructose, and sucrose. So it does have a little bit of residual sugar, but it doesn't have any sugar that you can pick up. So it's regarded as a dry wine. The alcohol is moderate, or medium. We're looking at, I'm just trying to think, it's like 14.2, it says 14 on the label, 14.2. So it really is on that high spectrum of medium, but it's not a massively 15, 16, 17% alcohol wine. So beautiful color, nice extraction. It has clarity, there's no sort of haziness, there's no sedimentation, there's no sort of gassiness in there as well. So everything looks as it should. But more importantly, how the wine smells, right? The smell leads to everything, because remember, your palate cannot taste flavors. Your palate can only pick up sweet, sour, salt, fat, bitter, umami. What you're going to taste is everything that you smell. You will never taste something that you don't smell. So shape of the glass is very important, and then the serving temperature. If you serve the wines too cold, they're going to be thin and harsh, and you serve them too warm, they're just going to be sort of muddled, right? So slightly lower than room temperature, let the wine build up to room temperature, but you certainly don't want to get it really, really warm as well. And before we jump into it, I also just want to say cheers and God bless and best wishes from our family to you. I hope everyone is doing well. So a good old swirly swirl, because what we're doing is we're volatilizing the esters. What is an ester? An ester is an odoriferous compound that reacts between an alcohol and an acid, right? So nose goes in, good smell. Now with a Cabernet dominated wine, you're thinking a couple of things. You're not thinking citrus fruit, stone fruit, tropical fruit. Those are whites, so we're going to eliminate that. So we're going to look at red berry fruit, blackberry fruit. We're going to look at herbal, herbaceous. We're looking at spice. And the first thing we're going to do is look at sort of primary fermentation aromas, which comes from fermentation. It also comes from the grape. Now, Merlot tends to be more red spectrum, that cherry, raspberry, currant. Cabernet tends to be cassis, blackberry, blueberry, black cherry. Cabernet Franc tends to be a little bit more spicy. It has that rotundone character, which is black pepper. It has a little bit of white pepper. You shouldn't get anything sort of herbal. Herbal could be mint and eucalyptus. Herbaceous could be thyme or rosemary or something like that. So those are the kind of things that you're going to think about sort of primarily. And then you're also going to look at secondarily, right? Secondary sort of aromas come from sort of the barrel. So the ML, now ML fermentation is when malic acid decarboxylizes into lactic acid. So that really sharp green apple acid turns into a much softer, rounder kind of milk acid. Now with Chardonnays, obviously you're looking for sort of that buttery or that yogurt or that cream cheese kind of character as well. It's obviously not as prevalent in reds, but you are going to look for sort of oak-derived flavors. You're going to look for that sort of the chocolate and the mocha and the espresso and the spice. And those are kind of things, but this is where it's subjective, and this is what makes wine so fun. So jump on in, and all I'm going to do is give you my personal opinion. So let's jump into it. So the nose is actually really, really, really aromatic. What I mean by that is, if you think of a very simple kind of thing is your chest, your chin, your nose, you can sort of smell it, but when you get here, you can definitely smell it there. So this is sort of a medium plus. I wouldn't say it's a pronounced aroma. Pronounced aromas are like Rieslings and Sauvignon Blancs and Gewürz and Torrontés, but it's got really a lot of sort of aromas that jump out of the glass. You don't have to swirl it violently. You don't have to really delve into it. It really has this beautifully aromatic intensity that I find really, really fascinating. So off the bat, I would say the Cabernet really comes through. It really is dark spectrum. You're going to get a little bit of the cedar. You're going to get a little bit of that smoke and that sort of dark, kind of toasty kind of character in there as well. But you are going to get a lot of sort of black fruited components, sort of black fruit. So I'm getting kind of a licorice component, and licorice is actually a spice. So if you think of black licorice, I get that. There's definitely sort of blackberry and black plum and black cherry in there. There might be a touch of sort of herbaceousness, a nice sort of a thyme or a rosemary or anything like that. I wouldn't say it's herbal. I'm not getting any sort of mint or eucalyptus. When you think of mint and eucalyptus, you always think of sort of Coonawarra Cabernet down in South Australia, which is grown on that terroir limestone soil. But really, really lovely, dark fruited, and it's dominated by primary fruits. There are some secondary notes in there, so this wine is youthful or developing. It does mean that it's not showing any aged kind of character. Aged would be truffles and meat and leather and cigar box. So we're not getting any of that. So this wine is really in its its infancy in terms of its evolution and its maturation, which is great for someone who is tasting this wine and going, this wine is something I can put down. It's not showing any developed kind of character as well. It's dominated mainly primarily, and it has some secondary notes. So this is a developing wine, but there's nothing tertiary in there as well. So, all right, so it's got a beautiful nose, but at the end of the day, wine is all about tasting, right, or drinking. So here we go. Okay, so we're going to run the wine all around the mouth. We're going to look at key components, right? Sweetness, there's no sweetness, it's dry. Alcohol, we already said, is sort of medium on the high end and medium. The tannins are there, right? But they're not trying tannins. So these are not sort of high tannins, they're medium plus tannins. The acidity is what I really love on this wine. Now, everyone thinks Cabernet, it's full-bodied, therefore it's ripe, it doesn't have acidity. Cabernet has acidity. Cabernet has a lot of acidity. That tingling and that prickly sensation on the tip of your tongue, that's the acid. And this is sort of medium plus for me, which is great because it really balances out the fruit and the alcohol and the tannin aspects in the wine as well. So, all right. So you look at it, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, your tongue is still tingling. It's got really bright acidity. It doesn't mean the wine's tart. It just has this brightness and this elegance, which is needed because this wine has got so much tannin and so much oak in there as well. The next thing you look at is the body. And we always say sort of medium-bodied, full-bodied, light-bodied. Think of whole milk, 2% milk, and skim milk. If you taste those will give you the idea of what body or weight in the mouth feels. Flavors-wise, the flavors are intense, and the flavors are, again, would go sort of black spectrum. It's got that smoke, it's got that coffee, it's got that mocha, it's got that sort of spiciness that comes from the barrel. But what I really love about this wine, it's got a really lovely finish. And the finish is described as how long the positive attributes of a wine persist in the mouth. Now, you can get a long finish, but it's all tannin and it's grippy and it's stemmy. You wouldn't say that's a long finish. You would just say the wine's astringent or it's underripe or whatever it is. Long finish is not how long the wine sits in the mouth. It's really how long the positive attributes kind of fit in the mouth. So for me, you get the fruit, you get the acid. I'm still tasting the fruit, So it's got a long finish. And then you want to determine the quality, right? So you've spent some money on this wine. When's the best time to drink it? So let's look at a couple of things. Let's look at what we call the Blick test. Balance, length, intensity, complexity. Balance, I think this wine is balanced. There's nothing that jumps out at you. It's not too tannic, it's not too sweet, it's not too acidic, it's not too, fruit forward. So it's got great balance. The length, I really like the length. The intensity is there and complex. Complexity just means it's got many clusters of flavors or aromas, right? It's not just dark fruited. It could be dark fruit, it could be red fruit, it could be spicy, it could be herbal. There's a lot going on there as well. So I think this is a wonderful bottle of wine. And again, all credit to that, to the folks in the vineyard. The folks who work in the vineyard behind me, who took advantage of Mother Nature's sort of generosity for giving us ample sunshine and low rainfall and allowing us to harvest grapes that were really ripe. So what I want to do, my wife is riding up a storm here. So just to talk, to put this aside, because it is a young wine, even though it has been decanted now for around three or so hours, I'm going to put it to the side. Let's take some questions or comments. Tell us what you think about the wine. Tell us, is it young? Do you want to lay it down? What are you having with it? And what do you think about it as well? And if you have a negative comment, please don't be afraid to let us know. We want to know as well. And that's the only reason. The reason for sort of negative comments and negative data is so that we can learn and make a better wine down the line. So let me put that to the side. Good evening, wifey. How are you? You doing all right? Mm-hmm. She's tired, looking after all these kids and running a household. Superstar, but even Superman gets tired now and again. So what kind of questions and from whom? So what do we think?
So Glenn Johnson asked, how did you come up with the blend?
All right, so Mr. Johnson, Glenn, how did we come up with the blend? So the intention was to make a blended wine, obviously, and we wanted to make something that was really Cabernet based. I think we're a little bit selfish on that because we always hear that Cabernet cannot do well or grow well in Virginia. So when we have an opportunity to make a Cabernet or a Cabernet-based blend, it's something that we always want to pursue. But like I said earlier, we also had a Merlot blend that we just really, really loved, but for different reasons. It was so elegant and so fruit-forward and so soft, and we had the volume to be able to do both. We played around for quite a few months on the blends, and they were always sort of 78 to 85% Cabernet, and we knew that Merlot and Cabernet Franc were going to play a role. Petit Verdot we played around with, but we eliminated it really early. Petit Verdot in 17 was just a little reductive. It had slight eggy, it had a great color, it had great tannin, but so did the Cabernet. So we eliminated Petit Verdot, and we just felt classic was the way to go. So left bank, which is Cab Merlot with maybe a little bit of Cab Franc, and just felt that just equal portions of small amounts of Cab Franc and Merlot really, really helped the wine. And it was really just to fill in the little gaps and give some complexity to the Cabernet, and hopefully the proof is in the pudding. This is I think it's showing beautifully right now, and I hope you agree. So the blend is just all sensorial. You do it on a piece of paper, you have an idea of where you want to go. We play around with a lot of blends over a couple of months, and this is the one we came up with, and we hope you enjoy it.
Michael Francis, when in the growing cycle do you start to think you'll have a heritage in that vintage?
That's a great question. So when in the growing cycle do we potentially think of a heritage? And that's part sort of production, that's also part the demand of the wine club. We are a business, obviously, we have to satisfy the wine club and the tasting room. So you have to look at a certain amount of volume, so we know how much fruit we might be hanging. If we have a big voluminous Cabernet year and Merlot and Cabernet Franc, we always know that there's a potential to make both a single varietal. A lot of people say, what's our estate wine? And I always say it ranges, right? So in certain years, Cabernet Franc's our estate wine. In other years, Cabernet Sauvignon's our estate wine. And in 2017, the Heritage and the Cab were both of equal quality as well. So I think as a producer, we look at the volume, but at the end of the day, it's always determined by the quality. We pull this wine out of the hat so few times in our winemaking career. In 20 years that we've been making wine, we've only made 6 or 7 bottlings. So you're looking at 35% of the wines that we make are heritage. Which is a minimal amount of wine. So it has to be voluminous. It has to be of a quality that surpasses what we've done in the past. So the only time we're going to do a heritage next is if we can build upon the fantastic 2017. But part of it is just volume and quality, making sure that we make our Cabs, our Cab Francs, our Merlots and PVs, the wines that I hope you like. And then if we have some left over and we have the opportunity to make a blend, then we certainly will go ahead and do that if we think the quality is there. But great question nonetheless, so thank you so much.
And then Thomas Barnes asked, is there a wine that smells or tastes like grapes? He likes grapes. They always say it tastes like other fruit. Like, what wine tastes like grapes?
So there are white wines that I would say are very grapey, but if you want grapey kind of tasting wines, I would go with Muscat. Muscat varietals, you get Muscat Blanc, you get Muscat d'Alexandria, you get Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain, you get Muscat Autumnal. There's a lot, but they always have a very floral. They're low to medium acidity, and they always have this sort of grapey, inherent grapey kind of quality as well. So sparkling wine, something like Asti, which is made from Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain, which is in the Piemonte region. That is a wonderful wine. I'm trying to steer away from sort of the American species, the Cayugas and the Niagaras and stuff like that, because they do have a grapey kind of quality to it as well. But I think if you think of grapiness in terms of a flavor component, I always think Muscat. And Muscats they can make sweet wines, they can make lusciously sweet wines, they can make fortified wines. If you think of the Rutherglens out of Australia and the Muscat de Baume de Venise, which is an appellation in the southern Rhone, but they all tend to have this floral, grapey kind of character in there as well. So it is funny that wine is made from grapes and we never describe them as grapes per se, or what we think of as grapes. But if you're looking for a very grapey kind of character wine, I would go with Muscat personally. And that's a great question for anyone else out there. Do you have a wine that really, really smells like white grape juice? Be interesting to see what people say.
I feel like Norton is so grapey.
Oh, I love you. Killing me with Norton. Norton can be grapey. Norton is a great pixie stick in a glass, though. It's like a warhead, sweet and sour kind of thing. Tastes like liquid Chinese food, I guess.
It tastes like grapes. It tastes like grape flavor.
I would say that. I would say that. Grape candy. All right. So the wife says Norton, and as you know, the wife's always right. So there you go. All right.
So Donna asked, you said something. The wine was slightly reductive or could be slightly reductive. What does that mean to say a wine is a little bit reductive?
All right, so wine goes through a fermentation process, right? So reduction in the simplest form is a compound called hydrogen sulfide, H2S. It's what they put in propane to let you know that there's a leak. Now, as it goes through the glycolytic pathway, which is glycolysis and glucose turns into pyruvate and it goes through the fermentation process, there are two sulfur-containing amino acids, which I think are methionine and cysteine. There's another one in there as well. And if we don't aerate the wine, if we don't feed the wine does tend to throw off a compound that smells like rotten eggs. There are what we call 9, and I'm going off memory here, they're called VSCs, or volatile sulfur compounds, because we spoke about volatility. By definition means the ability to vaporize. So if you have sort of an egginess in a wine, there's a couple of things that you can do. You either look at your nitrogen status in the wine. You find that maybe there's not enough, so you can add DAP, which is diammonium phosphate, or something like that. And it confides and it tends to blow off very quickly. The other way you can do it is you aerate the wine as well. But a lot of times you can treat it with copper, which is used quite often to treat it. But what happens then, in the simplest form, it can reduce further into something called mercaptans or thiols. Thiols are what you get in Sauvignon Blanc. It's that cat pee on a mulberry bush. New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are very thiolytic, and then they can reduce further, and you go into disulfides and diethyl disulfides and dimethyl sulfides. The first 6 are what we call low boilers. They're very reactive with copper. You can treat them. The last 3 are the high boilers, and we cannot treat that as well. So the reductive character in the Petit Verdot, it had a tendency to sort of impart a little bit of an eggy kind of component. The wine initially, when it comes out of the bottle, you kind of go, oh God, that doesn't smell good. But you aerate it, you stick it into the decanter, 3 or 4 hours later, that character just dissipates and the wine is fine. So it's going to dissipate with time in a bottle. It's going to dissipate with aeration. But if you're looking for something to drink right now, but that is reduction, which is the opposite of oxidation, obviously. And it in its simplest form smells like a hard-boiled egg. We get it all the time. Our wines are made in a reductive style. You know, we try and keep oxygen away from certain of our wines, you know, and sometimes the juice tends to smell like that, but it's very easily fixed. And a lot of time, you have also that sort of matchstick, you know, kind of flinty kind of character. Those are actually reduced components in wine that actually impart a really, really sort of specific character to sort of Burgundy Chardonnays or Sauvignon Blancs that everyone seems to like as well. So reduction is a really interesting kind of thing, but I think the Petit Verdot just showed a little bit too much of it early on, and we were sort of just a little bit hesitant to use it in the blend, especially when we had wonderful Cab Sav, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. So there you go.
And Michael Bissett asked, have you tried Hungarian oak, and what would that add to the wine?
Yeah, so when you look at Hungary, Hungarian oak comes from essentially the Carpathian mountain region. It's very tight, it's very cool. Obviously, we have played around with Hungarian oak. The barrels that we got and we used imparted a really sort of meaty kind of quality, and I think if you were making Syrahs, for instance, that quality would almost sort of suggest adding Mourvèdre. Because if you think of Châteauneuf-du-Pape and the Southern Rhone, like Gigondas and Vacqueyras, they add Carignan and they add Mourvèdre and they add Syrah to Grenache, and it has that sort of meaty, leathery kind of quality, and I found that those barrels imparted that kind of quality, which in itself was interesting, but it wasn't a style of wine that we were trying to make as well. And we played around with it for a couple of years. We used larger format barrels, and we really tried to, because they were really tighter grained, very tight grained like French oak, and they were a little bit cheaper then, and we really wanted to use them. But honestly, probably not a good enough winemaker to have incorporated them well into our wine program. and as such we've sort of discarded the use of Hungarian oak, and we're not using exclusively French, but we're definitely sort of reducing the amount of American barrels in there, and find that our style of wine really takes to French oak a lot better than some of the other barrels that we've been using. We're playing around with a little bit of acacia, in terms of whites, especially now that we have Petit Manseng coming on board this year, which I'm really, really excited about. There are barrels that we are looking to use, but most of it is French. But we have explored Hungarian oak, but just didn't at that time like what they did to the wine. They gave a very sort of cured meaty kind of character, and we did it with Cabernet Franc, which really made a wine that was not a style that I think is reminiscent of our vineyard. It was a very dominant kind of barrel, and as I said, a barrel is not supposed to be dominant. A barrel is supposed to sort of hold the terroir and the soil and the climate and the sort of character of the grape, and I found those barrels to be pretty aggressive, to be really honest with you. Cool.
And speaking of barrels, Glenn was guessing that this wine was aged in medium to heavy toasted French barrels.
He's 100% correct. Well, close. Medium plus, medium long. So the toasting levels, we tend to not do light toastings. I found the tannins in those barrels to be somewhat green. We don't want to go really heavily toasting because the barrels impart sort of a syrupy brown sugar kind of character, and I feel like our fruit doesn't have the sort of the richness to sustain that. So these are baked heads, 3-year air-dried oak, 22 to 28 mil thickness, medium plus, medium long, kind of toasting levels, and all exclusively French oak. So 100%. So kudos for, if you can taste that, you should go and write the WSET level 3. You would have killed it, because I don't have a palate like that. Cool.
James Bolito says, interesting that Stephen mentioned copper. Did not think that copper was reactive to a mild acid such as wine. Or is wine more acidic than I think it is?
So the acidity on wine runs in the pH of around 3 you get some wines that are 3.1, upward of about 4. So between 3 and 4, which is highly acidic if you think of 7 as neutral and 14 as alkaline. So put that into perspective, the amount of acid runs at around 5.5 grams per liter, as much as, our nectar, for instance, has like 14 grams per liter of acid. So it is actually quite an acidic medium. And copper is used. If you have a reduced wine, if you took a penny, and I think it's in the 1960s, a lot of those pennies were made out of copper, and you put it in your wine and you swirled it around, it would totally take away that as well. But wines are more acidic than most people think, in the region of 3 to 4 pH, depending on the varietal. Reds being obviously on the higher spectrum, whites being on the lower spectrum.
And Lenny asked for a friend.
For a friend.
When you say cab, are you usually referring to Cabernet Franc or Cabernet Sauvignon?
That's a great question. Tell your friend, Lanny, by the way. So when I say cab, I tend to gravitate towards Cabernet Sauvignon. I generally say Cab Franc. Both that, you got to remember that Cabernet Franc is actually the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon. So, even though Cab Sav is regarded as one of the top sort of echelon kind of wines in the wine world, it really was came about through this midnight tryst that Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc had. So when I refer to Cab, I generally refer to Cab Sav. If I'm talking about Cabernet Franc, I say Cab Franc. So great question. So please tell your friend we say hi, and we miss your friends, and hopefully we see your friends at the winery really soon, and tell those friends God bless, and I hope that grandson's doing well. All right, cool. Let's take another question and then taste some wines again. And then we'll talk about how you can get some of these wines, and then we'll talk about next week and what happens thereafter. So I'm going to take a...
So I didn't write down who asked this, but would you prioritize single varietal over blends for most grapes? And what would drive that decision?
That is a really, really interesting and a fantastic question. So... So the question, by the way, if you didn't hear, was, do we prioritize single varietal blends, or do we prioritize single varietals versus blends? So let's talk about the pros and cons of both. Obviously, blending, for balance and house style and complexity, and kind of building up maybe varietals that are, you can create a heritage that maybe is Cabernet Franc based or Cab Sav based or Merlot based. So you have that sort of flexibility in that you have multiple components and you can sort of amalgamate and put those things together to create a style that is somewhat consistent. So you do that. When you make a single varietal, I think the intention is really about the education of our vineyard, right? If the exploration of using a certain block or a certain varietal, the theory behind it is just sort of exploring, the potential of that block. You're not going to get the potential of the block when you blend it away. Yes, you might be able to taste that wine singularly as it's aging in a barrel, but the strength of a vintage is not how it tastes in the bottle straight away. The strength of the vintage to me is how it evolves and develops over the next couple of years, 3, 5, 7, 10. So by having these block 2s and 3s and 7s, we've bottled the wines, they're fantastic, but now we're able to see how they evolve. Do they turn out the way we did? Now, obviously, we're going to have vintage variation. So you can't say 2018 and 2019, you can't compare apples to apples, because one was a hell of a wet year with 90 odd inches of rain, and 19 was just the total antithesis. So there is the consumerism and wanting sort of a consistent product year to year, and that's the business model. And I think perhaps blends probably give you a little bit more sort of a safety net by doing that. The other thing is sometimes when you're drinking what you think are single varietal wines, they actually include portions of other wines. So you could be drinking a Cabernet, but can have up to 25% of 4 different varietals. You can be drinking Merlot, but can have Cab Sav or Shiraz or anything in it as well. So it's a twofold kind of answer. I think as a producer, a winemaker, a wine grower, the exploring of our vineyards and learning that is really critical to me. To learn if we were going to blend what each character comes from which block. But I think if you're a consumer, perhaps maybe blends are the better way to go, because then obviously we can build up the quality of a weaker wine by adding in a good wine, so on and so forth. So there are pros and cons to both. We've been making wines, obviously since 2002, so we've got 18 vintages under our belt. The vineyards are now starting to reach maturity. I think it really takes 25 years for you to really understand your vineyard. So you think of the Cab Savs and the Francs that we planted in 16 and 17 and 18. We're looking at 2035, 2040 before those vineyards really start showing their character. Then you got to make the wine and then give it another 5 to 10 years. So it's still going to take me a bloody 40 years to figure out these vineyards. By that stage, I'm 85 and 1 foot in the grave. So, we're trying to learn. The intention is to make the best wine possible, be uniquely Virginian, and number 2, kind of amplify and conserve in the glass the terroir and the aspect and the viticultural aspects that give us the chance to make these wonderful wines. And that's really it. Again, I think winemakers take a lot of credit, where most of the credit is due to the growers. But at the end of the day, the potential to make a world-class wine really starts with the fruit that gets delivered to your crush pad. And that's why I always want to push the kudos and the glory to the men and the women in the fields that give us that chance. In 17 and 19, making wine in Virginia is a pleasure and an honor, and it's somewhat easy because you've got all the raw products. In 18 and 20, the best winemakers with the best tools and the best sort of tricks up their sleeve will make the best wines. But I think in wonderful years like that, the best vineyards will always produce the best fruit, which gives you the opportunity to make the best wine. So it's a convoluted answer. It's very difficult. And I hope sort of I touched on pros and cons of why you might consider both sort of avenues, so to speak. All right. So if I may, I want to do a couple of things. So let's jump back into the wine. Obviously, this has had time to breathe in the glass. Temperature's now starting to come up. Again, wine, by the way, is drink what you like, how you like, when you like. So at the end of the day, when I say room temperature and you serve your wine chilled and that's how you like it, that's the way you should go to. But again, beautiful color, great extraction, just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous nose. It has really a purity of fruit. It's a little bit savory. And savory is the best way to describe savory is if you took a mushroom and you ate it, and you took a mushroom and you put it in a microwave. That's sort of a savory kind of or umami kind of character. So savory for me is always a slightly greeny under kind of character, right? This wine is gorgeous. This is a beautiful, beautiful wine, and I'm super proud of this wine. And again, I just want to say thank you to all the folks. But it's got balance. It's got richness. It's got fruit. It's got acidity. This is sort of just a complete wine. And again, maybe that gives sort of credence to perhaps wanting to go with blending, because the Cabernet Franc and the Merlot certainly helped this wine immeasurably as well. So Stephanie 10 said, how long would you sell this? Stephanie, that's a great question. Tasting this wine right now, if you had to drink this wine right now, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. If you gave this a couple of hours in a decanter, you're gonna have a wonderful, wonderful bottle of wine. But if you were to age this in a cellar facility, kind of 50 to 58 or 55 to 58 degrees, humid on its side, this wine could age, I think, upward of 10 years, no problem as well. It's going to develop less primary, it's going to become more secondary, and then it's going to have tertiary flavors. It could be pipe tobacco, it could be leather, it could be cigar box, it could be truffles, it could be meat, it could be leather. And I find those wines to be extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily sort of intellectual and emotional. But at the end of the day, if you were to have this with your partner and you're celebrating your 25th wedding anniversary and you have this wine, it's going to be a beautiful wine at that particular point in your life. And that's what I love about wine. Wine is also experiential, more so than anything else. But for me, I would probably give this another 3 years or so, and then I would start looking at drinking it from there on in. 3 to 5, 4 to 6, 5 to 7. I think it's going to beautifully kind of age. I also think it's going to take a while to get to that peak. And as we've touched on in the past, there is a theory that says the time it takes to go from bottling to reach its peak is the time it will stay at its peak. So this wine is going to take 5 to 6 years to get to its peak. It's going to spend another 5 to 6 years at that peak, which means it was bottled in 2021. So 2028 to 2035. It should still be drinkable. The other question that we should ask is, what do you think of older wines? Do you like fruit-forward wines, vibrant wines? Then perhaps drinking this wine a little bit earlier would be more in your wheelhouse. Now, if you like wines that show that sort of dusty, earthy kind of garri character, not saying this will develop it, but you have to know what older wines taste like to know if you want to age wines for that period of time. I do. I love terroir. I think you really get terroir and vintage variation and the strength of the vintage with 5, 6, 7, 10 years in the bottle. So for me, this is a wine that personally I would put aside for a couple of years, at least 3, 4, 5. I think this wine is a wine you stick in the back of your cellar. Everyone puts their best wines at the bottom of the cellar towards the back. Make sure the family can't grab it. But it's also a beautiful wine to drink right now. So, all right. So if you want this wine, by the way, you can get it. This is a wine that I think if you're a seller, and you don't mind spending a little bit of money, and I think there's great value to this. You can get it tonight. And if you're a wine club member, it's just 5% over and above your discount. So if you're a gold member, 25%. Normally, we're going to knock off another 5%. So you're going to get 30% off this wine, 25% if you're a silver member, and if you're not a wine club member, 10% off that. So the other question we always get is, how do we become a wine club member and what's the commitment? Well, it's free to join, and the commitment is 6 months, but we also know that once you meet Kefany and Karen and the staff and hopefully taste the wines, you're going to stay in there for a long period of time. And the great thing is you get 2 bottles a month, and it's always the same price. It's $50, it's 52 something if we send it to you. You also get a free flight, a glass of wine every time you come and visit us. We might make wines exclusively for you. We have some wines in our back pocket that we are going to do for you. And, again, it's not just a club, it's a family. You get taken well care of. We have a lot of other benefits that I think you could take advantage of. So consider joining if you're not a wine club member. But we also know that you have a lot of choices. There's a lot of incredible wines in Virginia. And at the end of the day, we just want you to drink local. Support local, drink local, stimulate the local economy, because that's what it is all about. Retail price on this is $74.95. That was the other question as well. So just to run down, we're coming up to 8 o'clock. Next week, by the way, I got asked to do a blind tasting of Virginia Cabernet Francs. So that is what we're going to do. And then the following week, we will announce the bundle thereon in. So blind tasting is a little bit daunting. We're going to go to our local wine store and we're going to ask for 5 Virginia Cabernet Francs. So if you want to play along, go ahead and do so. taste wines blindly, without the labels, without knowing what they are. We're going to ask for 5 Cab Francs. It could be our great friends from King and Barbazol and Veritas and Pollock. Could be our great friends up north. It could be the Bros and Glen Manor and Rappahannock Cellars. We don't know. We are going to do a blind tasting here. We're going to try and be kind, but we're going to be honest, and we're going to assess 5 Cabernet Francs, and then next week we will also announce what the following month will look like as well. So closing thoughts. Again, I just want to say thank you to the vineyard staff for all their hard work and dedication. Growing grapes in Virginia is a labor of love. It is tough. It is hard. Mother Nature challenges you. But when you get years like 14 and 17 and 9 and 10 and 19, you know why you do it, because you get a chance to make a really spectacular bottle of wine. Also want to say thank you to Wifey. She does a great job behind the scenes, kind of making sure everything runs. Let's see if there's another question or two that we can take, and then we will finish up.
I'm going to ask this other question. So that's 2 questions, but they're kind of related, so I'm going to ask them together.
Okay.
David Maddox asked how long it took you to come up with this blend. And related to that, Glenn Johnson asked, he's heard winemakers say that they plan blends over months, and that 2 wines that are just so-so on their own can be good, can make a great blend.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
100%. So the first question is, how long do we take? We take certainly a lot longer than we give you at consensus. That's for damn sure. The thing is, when we're blending, the wines are still in the barrel, so they're still evolving, they're still aging, they are changing. But it gives you an idea of sort of, so we come up with a rough blend and we say, okay, a dominant Merlot, dominant Cab Franc blend, we say, we like this, we're not a big fan of this, so we have that. And then it's just about tweaking. And if you've come to consensus, and by the way, consensus will be happening in January of 2022. If you know that, you know that a percent here and a percent there makes an extreme difference. So we blend for 6 months, and that's why it took us until the 2nd year before we blended the wine. The wine was all aged separately, and it's not only just blending varietal to varietal, it's also blending barrel to barrel. Because within the Cabernet, you have a lot of different coopers, different forests, different ages. So it's not just which Cabernet and which portion of Merlot and Cabernet Franc. It's also a question of which barrel of Cabernet Franc goes to the blend, which goes to the varietal program or the block program. So there is a hell of a lot of sort of detailed work that goes into it. And then, the question from Glenn Johnson in terms of 2 mediocre wines can come together and create magic. I fully believe that. Absolutely. We've seen it where they're just okay on their own, but 2 varietals that are somewhat mediocre, they just complement each other and they create a wine with depth and personality and character and complexity. So yes, blending certainly is a tool that is viable. And if you look at, the example of blending, look at France, look at Bordeaux. Bordeaux does blending and they do it incredibly well, and for the reasons of vintage variation and varietals doing well or poorly based on the weather as well. But great questions nonetheless. So I hope, yes, people are asking, where are the boys? Well, here's one boy. Oh wait, we got to put him on screen so he can see. Where's Mavi? There's Mavi. And where's Mr. Alakai? And you can see there's Mommy, and there's Alakai, and they're the big boys. There's the big boy. Oh no, there's the big boy. And then we have kitty cats, and we have nieces, and we have daughters. If you love kitty cats, Green Dogs Unleashed, great adoption program. If you're looking for a fur ball for your forever home, reach out. I told you my wife is a superstar. Not only does she take care of the household and has a PhD and all of that, but also we have these cute kitty cats that we rescue. And if you want one, let us know as well. And then obviously Aria is right there, gorgeous little girl as well. Alrighty. So to finish up, I hope you go and have a wonderful week. I hope you really, really, really like this heritage as much as I do. And as much as we enjoyed making it. I also just want to say, as always, just thank you. Thank you for your support. And thank you for all the well wishes for the exam. We'll let you know once those results come out. I really like this heritage. I hope you take advantage of it. Again, KeswickVineyards.com, our tasting room. Give us a call. Kefni, who's online, if you haven't met Kefni, is our new wine club manager. She is superb and will take great care of you. Donegoff says, how's Aria's arm? Her arm is all healed. She got a bit of a fright because I came back and I said, the doctor said she needed to do her exercises, which meant 10 diaper changes, sweeping the floor and making dinner. And she almost about died and went as white as a cloud. So she's doing great. Thank you for that. And again, I just want to say that, golly, this is a pretty wine. John Fergan says, best wine we've had from Keswick so far. So that is great praise, and thank you so much, because I think we've made some pretty wines in the past, but I do love this heritage, and I hope you take advantage of it, and I hope you lay it down, and I hope it gives you as much pleasure as we enjoyed making it. So next week it's a blind tasting. It's 5 bottles of wine in brown bags and 5 glasses, and we're going to be totally honest, and we don't know what's going to come out of that. And then we're also going to announce the following sort of bundle for the month. And all we can say really is, just have a wonderful week. Be good, be kind, be gracious, tell people you love them. Simple things that go a long way. Remember, the world is still a great place, and we're still very blessed to be where we are and with those that are. So from my family, obviously, which is all the Furballs and Alakai and Kat and Aria and Tiger Lily and Chris and Maverick, we want to say God bless. God bless you, God bless your families. Be happy, be kind, and I'll see you in 6 days and 23 hours for what promises, if nothing else, to be a really fun and informative tasting. Tasting rooms are open. Lots of things going on, by the way. We'd love to have you out. Things are opening up. Things we're very positive about the future, and I hope you are too. So again, God bless. Heritage 2017 showed beautifully tonight. I'm so chuffed. I'm so proud of the guys that grew the grapes, and I'm glad I didn't screw it up. Cheers, guys.